Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We are back from taking a summer break on our training, so welcome to fall and welcome to September's interval training. I'm Rebecca Campbell, Senior Director at Peloton. Thank you for joining today's training, which is all around predictive planning. The format for today is roughly 20 to 25 minutes of an overview by my colleague Wes Mather, followed by a few minutes of Q&A. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone will be muted during the training and chat will be disabled. Please put your questions in the Q&A and we will get to them after the training. If you have additional questions or we were not able to get to your question today, please feel free to reach out to us. Also, if you have ideas for future trainings you'd like to see, please let us know. Without further ado, let's get into predictive planning. Over to you, Wes.
All right, thank you, Rebecca, and hello, everyone. So as Rebecca mentioned, today's interval training is focusing on the world of predictive planning within the Oracle EPM Cloud landscape. So the purpose of the call will be to introduce the predictive planning capabilities of the Oracle EPM Cloud. We'll do this primarily through a live demo. And really the focus is going to be on highlighting the use cases for FP&A teams. So there are three main predictive planning capabilities. So first is predictive planning, which is statistical models that are embedded on forms directly in your environment. And these allow users to perform quick kind of on-the-fly analysis. The next option is auto predict, which is scheduled statistical models that can be executed for larger swaths of your data. Like maybe by entity or by product family. And then also they store the results, allowing for that variance comparison analysis between, say, maybe forecast and prediction. The last piece we're going to look at is advanced predictions. And this is a newer release from Oracle, which is kind of really building upon that predictive planning. So these can also be scheduled in our multi-variate models, which allow for multiple input drivers to predict one target account. So ultimately what we're trying to do with today's session is we want to make sure that you are now familiar with the options available to you within Oracle EPM Cloud when it comes to predictive planning, but also to when and why to use them within your planning cycle. So hopefully you'll come out of this knowing what's available to you and why to use them. And obviously, if you want to learn more, certainly reach out to us. We're here to help. So with that, I'm going to jump over into our demo, and I'm going to be starting with the kind of predictive planning and auto predict side. All right, so I'm just here in kind of the Oracle Vision demo app. And like I said, we're going to be focusing in on the kind of on-the-fly predictive planning first. So I'm just going to hop over into my data forms section. And I already have two forms opened up already just to help grease the wheels here of the demo. The first form we are looking at here is the predict revenue form. So really, you could picture this being kind of any standard input form that a user might be looking at. So this one, how it's set up is users are going to come in here and they can select by account and by their cost center or department, and then input that revenue by their different product lines here in the rows. So a pretty standard input form, but the reality is that predictive planning, it can really work on a host of different forms. So just something to keep in mind that it's very flexible as far as where it gets tagged into, but it really is driven by the form itself. So another thing to note here too is that if you were to look at your environment today, right, any other given forms, and you go up to your actions dropdown, you will notice that predictive planning button is is already built in and available to you. So just really want to call out that it's driven by forms and it's available today. The only thing to really keep in mind is that there are some recommendations from Oracle on how to build that form to really support the predictive planning. But once you have that form built, you now have the access to that predictive planning capabilities. No other extra steps required, building or enablement there needed. So with that in mind, I'm going to run our predictive planning here. And so when I click that, the system is actually running a prediction for the data present on this form. And that is what I'm seeing down here in the graphical display. So when I click that predictive planning, it is actually going through the statistical models. It is finding the lines of best fit, and it is producing these results here on the fly for the user. Like I mentioned before, it is driven by what you see on the form here. So this one, our vision environment, the forecast is opening up in July of 24, and it's running for 12 months up through June of 25. So these are the months that are open to to me as an FP&A user. A couple of things to just note with predictive planning. Like I've mentioned a couple of times, when we click that button, it ran the statistical analysis on the fly and made it available to the end user. So from a use case perspective, really how this might plug in and how you might use it is you're going through your forecasting process and you've maybe taken a first pass of your data, whether you input it, maybe you had a driver calculation, maybe you just took the prior year's actuals and you just grew it using a growth rate, something along those lines. But now you have that first pass, so kind of your working forecast, and you're curious to see how it compares to, maybe a statistical trend based on your actuals. You on the fly can run this prediction as a kind of a litmus test or a way to measure your existing forecast. So how you might do that, right, as a user, you've run the prediction. So how are you really going to use that in the real world? And I feel like there are two key metrics that Oracle produces that help the user kind of make quick sense of the information that's been produced. The first number I always like to look at is over here on the right-hand side. You'll see this box labeled forecast working, and they're going to give it a risk score. And what Oracle is doing here is they are flagging what the growth rate of your current user-driven forecast working is. So that's the data up here we see in the form. And so if we take a look at just what the user has input, the user has forecasted a 23% growth for their revenue. And what Oracle is saying is they're flagging that as a risk because based on their trend line, they're only seeing a 4% growth rate. So right away, Oracle's like, hey, we feel like your forecast is a lot higher. Now, there might be very perfectly valid reasons for that. Maybe there's going to be a targeted, marketing campaign during that time for that product line. There might be other reasons why there's an expected spike there in revenue. And if there's an explanation for it, then no concerns. But maybe there isn't like a ready explanation there. So this might be a flag to the user to go back through and at least check what they've already put in there, right? Again, check the inputs, check the drivers, make sure that it is aligned with their, kind of current expectations. And then the other thing to quickly check is, again, once you produce this predictive planning result, is down here the accuracy from Oracle. So Oracle will produce their own accuracy score based on how well their line of best fit matches the actuals data. So here on the left-hand side of my line chart, the green is your actuals. So right, you can see the fluctuations over month and years over the last, since January of FY21. The blue line is then what Oracle has produced as they call the linear trend line, but really, it's that line of best fit. And they're going to trend it to that, to that data. And they're saying based on the statistical models they can run, they're able to produce one that follows it, with a 95% accuracy. So that way, when they extend that line of best fit into the future, it gives them a very high level of confidence that this is how the data is going to follow, again, based on the historical actuals. So, again, those two numbers, the accuracy produced by Oracle, but also the difference compared to the user-driven forecast working, I think really are the two key main metrics that users can pull from this. There's a lot of other great information in here as well, as far as what's the historical data that was used. You can also control for things like outliers and then special one-off events. that might, influence the data. So there are certainly other pieces that can be layered on here to make it, more accurate or more representative of your business cycle. But just want to call out that if you're trying to get familiar with this and kind of get your feet established, that's where, I really recommend starting. The last thing I will call out here is that, or maybe I'll say two last things here. One is that, like I mentioned before, this prediction, it does run for everything on the form here. So like I said before, it is tied to the form. So if I just click, say I move down to projects on my form, you'll notice that the chart and the graph all update as well. So as I click through here, it'll show you, right, it's run a different prediction by each product line. So it's not like you have to go through here and run it for every single, I'll scroll down here. You can see, right, it's going to update everything based on the click I've done here. It's already run these predictions for each line in your form. You can also use the drop down to to move around the rows as well. I always find it easiest, right, to go through here. So that's just one thing to note, is that it's tied to your form and it's going to produce all the predictions right there. But now going back to actually how to make this actionable, say you're the end user, and I'm just going to go back to this this top line here. And like I said before, right, looks like compared to your working forecast, a growth rate a lot higher than expected. And you're thinking, oh, you know what? Actually, this has been higher than really anticipated. This is I really should correct this. You are able to copy the prediction back into your working forecast. So you can easily do that using the paste button. You say you're going to copy from the prediction, you're going to paste it back into your working forecast. For me, it looks like only the first 6 months really need to be copied over. So I'm just going to change that over to 6 months. And I'm going to do it just for my currently selected member, that financials. You could run it for every single member, every row you have. So I'm going to hit apply. So that copies it over. And you'll notice here now my prediction and my working forecast are aligned identically. Oracle at this point says, well, your working forecast against the prediction are now very much aligned. So the risk has gone down low. And then just the last thing to keep in mind is that once you've done that copy and paste, you do just want to make sure you hit save. And now your working forecast is updated. So just the last few things I'll highlight on the predictive planning side is that this is really geared toward end users who are going through, and they're the ones responsible for, inputting the data for their forecast, or maybe running the driver calculations. And they want to have a tool to quickly, litmus test their working forecast. This is an on-the-fly prediction, right? Once I'm done running that prediction and I close out that chart, it's now gone, right? The results aren't saved. I can't go copy and paste that somewhere else. It really is kind of an on-the-fly analysis tool for end users. But like I said, pre-built into all your forms. So it's very easy for them to make use of it. So then if we move on to the next capability or functionality, which is the auto predict, what it really does is it takes what we just learned on the predictive planning, and now it basically makes it stored, and it allows you to schedule it. So really it says, okay, we understand the on-the-fly analysis for end users is great, but what happens if you want to run it for maybe a larger swath of data, and you also want to store the results so you can maybe compare it back to your working forecast on a broader scale. And that's what auto predict really allows us to do. It takes these predictions that are running on the fly based on a form, and now lets you run it without a form on a lot larger scale. So I'm just going to hop over to this other form here, the auto predict revenue. And this just shows if I had run the prediction across a larger swath of my business, but then also now I have the results stored. So now that I have it stored in in different scenarios and versions, I can do that variance comparison and analysis to see, okay, well, here's my working forecast, which was user driven, and now here are my predictions. One thing I didn't highlight in detail on that previous predictive planning side is that the tool can produce kind of your base case or the most likely outcome, but you can also do a best case and worst case based on the number of standard deviations you want to build into that statistical model. So here in this case, we have populated the most likely outcome or that base case, but there's also a best case from the predictive forecast. So you now have both of these stored because of the auto predict that ran the prediction statistical models. And you can now compare that to what your forecast working was, and you can then produce those variance scenarios as well. So at a glance, I can look here and say, oh, well, it looks like the prediction, right? The base case is a little bit higher than what the team has put in from their working forecast. So maybe that will prompt during the review cycle to come back and say, hey, are we undercounting revenue, right? Are there reasons that we kind of across the board and across our product lines are forecasting lower than just a trend if we extend it into the planned year? So what's great about auto predict is that now, instead of just being on the fly and individual user driven, it can be more holistically set up. And I think the two great use cases here is, one, this could be a great way to start your forecast or budgeting cycle. Let's say you have a prediction that's put out by the system, and then it becomes a way to compare that's available to all users. Now, everyone can access that. And it's a great way to then review the final, forecast before it's submitted, so that, again, you can kind of compare it to what a prediction was based on just statistical best line fits. And again, allows you to really pressure test and make sure that there's no, large gaps or maybe omissions in your forecast. But otherwise, really the auto predict and predictive planning, they're running the same statistical models. And they're really running that same kind of best fit line across the data. A couple of notes just about that. The Oracle really takes care of all the statistical, advanced setup and all the math that's crunching behind it. There are, if you want to, or you have a statistical background, by all means, you can get into the system and you can tweak those settings and how you want to have the seasonality accounted for and things like that. But on the flip side, if you don't have a statistical background, it's not required. Oracle will automatically select the line that has the least amount of error. So it is nice that really there's no heavy math or statistical background needed of your users in order to generate these. They can be scheduled, run very easily, and then the insights can be reviewed either individually or as a kind of review or collectively. So those are the the first two kind of prediction capabilities available to users of the Oracle EPM Cloud. The third one I now want to jump to is the advanced predictions. And so I'm just gonna pop out over here. So to first just clarify, predictive planning, what we were looking at there was what you would call a univariate prediction, right? So that's going to, based on your historical data, it's going to trend and forecast into the future using just kind of one single input to then predict one output. What's different with advanced predictions is that you now have the ability to do multivariate planning. And so that's really the value and the power behind advanced predictions. And so to use an example here from our Oracle demo app, we have volume, right? So volume is the target that we're trying to predict with advanced predictions. But now, instead of just taking the trend of volume, right, the best line fit from our historical actuals, we can actually take drivers, these input drivers, we can use multiple of them, and we're going to use those drivers, their future values as well, to then basically draw out the correlations and predict what volume will be for our forecaster plan. So some of the drivers here, just an example that might play into our volume are things like, so industry volume. So if we were to look at aggregate, kind of the company and other competitors, we might look at average selling price. We can look at external factors like GDP growth rates and also things like inflation rates, so the PCE here. And then also, too, we can look at other internal factors like the, does the product line we're trying to predict the volume on, does it have, accessories, like yes or no? So you're not just tied to dollar amounts. You can also have a smart list dropdown, right? Selection. So the system is also able to look at not just numerical data here to draw out those insights. So what like I said, the big difference, right, is the multivariate versus the univariate for these predictions. So as a user, you would still need to identify what are those drivers. What are the 3, 4, 5 kind of input drivers that are going to help predict the one target account that we're trying to run a prediction for, again, in this case, volume. So you do need to tell the system what we're going to use. But what's great is that once those are identified, the statistical models provided by Oracle, they're going to find which ones are most closely correlated, which ones can most speak to the fluctuations that we've seen, and we'll draw out a advanced prediction based on those inputs. So as far as the use case goes and when users would want to use this, I think it's very similar to the auto predict in that these results are going to be stored and then can be viewed. So, a great use case would be, let's say at the beginning of, again, your forecast or budget cycle, there's a handful of key accounts, from a P&L perspective that are crucial to your business, and you would love to have, another set of eyes to produce a number you could compare against. This would be a great example for that, where you can have the system pre-populate this for you, and then you can choose to use that as your starting point, or you can use it as a measuring stick to compare it against how you're currently preparing those numbers. So really, it's I would say from an advanced prediction case, you're trying to target those handful of lines on your P&L where you're going to find the most value, and especially too where you already have some drivers identified. That's where advanced predictions can really help speed up the forecast process, but also give you a little bit more confidence of your accuracy. So as far as how the kind of advanced predictions works and how it just plays out from a demo perspective, we have here our drivers. You would identify those ahead of time. So like I said, we have a couple in here that have been brought in. We also, again, we're going to look at this both from a historical perspective, so back 23, 21, but into the future. And then up here in this middle chart, this is where the prediction is actually going to run and populate. So the closed months here, right, January through June, those are our actuals. July through December, those are our open forecast months. And so these are all predicted amounts based on all the values that we have for our drivers. So how it works is that you'll define those drivers. So here you can see just these are the individual breakouts of all those drivers. And here's that drop down I was talking about before. You could have both numerical data, and you can have descriptive information in here, right, with or without accessories for those product lines. You can also have external factors like the GDP growth rate. But so you're going to identify all of these external factors. You're going to have this data populated. So now this data might be pulled in from external websites, right? So the GDP growth rate might come from maybe like a bank or a federal government website readout. Or you might then have pull in, like other teams might provide these different inputs. But so you'll prepare the drivers kind of in a normal standard fashion. One thing that's nice about advanced predictions is that if some parts of the data you would like to use as a driver are missing or incomplete, the system can populate those missing values for you. It can run that predictive planning kind of univariate approach, or there are other options. So, if there's something that is a driver or it does help run that target account, you can have Oracle produce the actual input for the driver as well, based on other statistical models like that univariate one. But so once you have all of these populated, what you'll do is you'll run that prediction engine, which would have been set up, and then it's going to populate, like I said, how we had it set up, right, was in those future months for volume. Once it's done running, the great screen that's provided by Oracle here to really kind of understand the results is this forecast accuracy option here. So I'm going to jump to that here next. And what we're looking at here, and I'll point people here to kind of the lines that are highlighted in the green and the rows, is we're looking at, first off, here is the forecast accuracy as compared to the predictions put together by multivariate, but also if we had done a univariate prediction. So what they're saying is, okay, so here's the raw volume that was put together by multivariate predictions versus forecast versus actuals. It's then doing a comparison between those to understand, okay, well, how accurate was each prediction? And then it's saying, okay, well, now let's just run a quick analysis or a variance between what was originally submitted versus what the actuals were, and where did you gain accuracy? So what it's saying is that here was our original forecast of 1,100 units in a closed month. It ended up being 1,600 units. A multivariate prediction, if it had been run, would have produced 1,500, and then a univariate would have produced 1,200. So that's the kind of on the fly one we already looked at. And so what it's saying is that based on those accuracies compared to actuals, the multivariate produced a 28% better forecast than the original kind of maybe user or driver-based one. So this is a great example where if you have the right drivers and inputs identified, you can apply that and produce, more accurate predictions, especially for, again, those kind of like key metrics within your P&L. Volume, it could be revenue driven. But the idea here is that you can produce a more accurate forecast on that first pass with that multivariate approach. And I'll just call out that not necessarily every single P&L line item is going to be a great fit for predictive analysis, whether it's univariate or multivariate. So certainly there's some amount of time spent identifying those good use cases. But we always feel like there are a handful of use cases where this information can be applied in order to drive out some of that additional value that is readily available to you as an Oracle EPM user. So hopefully, these demos gave you a little bit of an idea of what is readily available today to you as a user of Oracle EPM Cloud. Just as a quick recap, that was the predictive planning, you had auto predict, and then you had advanced predictions. We find a lot of value in this. I know there's a lot of a buzz around AI as well. And at the very least, we feel like this is a great tool to give to your FP&A users as another way to really kind of measure and speed up their forecast process.
Thank you, Wes. That was fantastic. Great training. We actually do have a few questions from the audience, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First up, what are the data needs in order to support AI and predictions? Speaking of AI.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I know a lot of times, we'll hear from users like, oh, well, my data is incomplete, or do I have enough history? Or, the big concern is kind of like this term of big data. And the reality is, from an Oracle perspective, you don't need big data. You just need data unique to your business and have it available there by the dimensions that you are that are important to you. So first off, don't feel like you need a huge data set or a big data. It's really, as long as you have the data specific to your business laid out, that's going to check the box. And then the other rule of thumb is you want 2 times the historical data for the amount of months or periods you're trying to forecast into the future. So let's say you're trying to do 12 months of a prediction, you want to have 24 months of historical data.
Great, makes sense. Next question, can historical data be stored in a different cube when running and storing future data with advanced predictions?
Yes, you can specify the source of your historical data, and it can be a separate cube from where the prediction is going to be stored. And that's actually, I think, a very great setup to use. I think, as a lot of our EPM users know, A lot of people like to store their history somewhere else so that they're not carrying around all the historical data in their active planning cycles. So definitely you can store that data historically somewhere else, maybe like an ASO cube, maybe it has 10 years, 5 years. And then that way you have a great resource to pull in from for those predictions.
Great. And last question, what additional effort is needed to configure or install prediction functionality?
Yes, so all three of those items we just walked through today on that demo, all three of those are readily available to everyone on the Oracle EPM Cloud enterprise licensing. So really no additional kind of development work is required. For the most part, it's kind of like a check the box kind of GUI exercise where you go through, you specify the the historical data where you want to run the prediction, things like that, and then you're off and running. So, no development work required, very minimal configuration, and all of those are readily available to anyone on Oracle EPM Cloud.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Wes, and thank you everybody for joining today. Thanks for taking the time. Please reach out with any additional questions and stay tuned for future trainings. Thank you. Have a good day.
Everyone.